Okay, so this is finally my reaction video to the piece that Jeremy Blake made out of my piece, Fanfarrón. If any of you haven't seen it yet, it's on the main channels of both of our channels. I wrote an orchestral version of one of his electronic tracks, and he did an electronic version of my orchestral piece, Fanfarrón, which you can hear in full on this channel if you haven't already heard it. And at the time, this was a week or so ago, I did a sort of classic, YouTube reaction video to Jeremy's track, and then I talked a little bit about it, and that's all coming up. But I'd finished the main video and mine. I was originally going to put all of this on the end of that, and the video is quite sort of snappy paced, and me waffling on about Jeremy's piece didn't feel in the same league of interest, so I thought it'd be better to shove it aside just for you guys who are really interested to hear this reaction. But it didn't feel like it fitted in the main video, so that's why it's here. And I probably would have done it sooner, but with all of this virus related stuff going on, it's been a pretty crazy week. It's obviously not as hard for some of us composers who are basically used to being self-quarantined for most of our lives, but I feel really torn for many colleagues who are seeing their future months look wiped out in terms of gigs and concerts. So my heart goes out to everyone who's struggling at the moment, and that includes, of course, the Orchestra of the Swan, who I feel like deserve an extra shout out for their amazing work on all of these projects. They also did the previous 5 composers project, and they've been such fun to work with and so amazing to do these projects in a tiny amount of time. So I'm really grateful to them, and I'm thinking of all of them in the coming weeks and months. Hopefully, we'll all pull together and pull through this. So we'll listen through together to the whole track with me doing a few reactions, which, as I say, aren't very interesting, and then I'll talk a little bit afterwards about some of the issues that arose. A couple of things that have come up as a result of my original video. Firstly, there were several people noticing that the poor old bass trombonist was sitting there doing nothing, and that was simply because I didn't write a part for him. It was a part for the piece was written for 2 trombones. He was playing later in the session, so he was just, I guess, waiting for his turn. But it wasn't that I just couldn't think of anything to write for the bass trombone. It was that I didn't write anything for it. So that explains that mystery. Okay, so here we go. Very boppy. Synth heavy. Okay, it's got a solid beat. Wow, the feel is completely different. It's amazing. Same notes, different feel. Still a lot going on in all different areas. That's what makes it so fun to listen to. Ooh, fat bass. Jeremy clears textures really well in this way, I think. Oh yeah, it's kept my scrunchy harmonies at this point. Still got those rising notes in the background. favourite. It's so cute. This is amazing. It's taken a little turn on the composition. Tweaked it a little bit. Wow. Amazing. It strikes me really that it's amazing how different it is. It's such a different piece, even though, as I said, the notes are the same. Although I think there's quite a lot that Jeremy and I have in common musically. I love this sort of enthusiastic kind of upbeat vibe he often has, but it's also so rich with colours. There's so much going on. Just makes it really, really interesting to pick out all these little details that are flying around in your ears. And I guess that's quite similar to what I try and do. Even if I try and be, more negative, my music always seems to come out in this quite positive spirit. I think Jeremy may be a bit like that. One of the main changes I think we both made to each other's work was in terms of the use of the snare drum. So in mine, I found I was cutting the snare drum quite a lot. And here, Jeremy's clearly added quite a lot of the backbeat to my original piece, so it changes the feel of it quite a lot. I guess it's one of the things that really defines something being more poppy or less poppy is how much of that backbeat you get. The other really big difference, I think, is in terms of how much you can do with the bass in electronic music. So in the orchestra, we've really got the bass itself. You may have low trombones and you may sometimes have tubas, although I didn't in mine. And there's very little that has the strength and punch that you get in electronic basses. And there was so much going on in the bass in an exciting way in this piece, which in Jeremy's version. So there's so much of that kind of really powerful sound in the bass that you just can't get in an orchestral setting. And the other thing I think is really interesting is the intensity that, to me, Jeremy's is really packed full of this right high peak intensity almost all the way through. And again, that's hard to do in an orchestral setting. And I found that as well when I was working on orchestrating Jeremy's piece, that I had to change my way of thinking about intensity. I think I'm really happy with how both of these reinterpretations worked out, because they both sound like new pieces, and I don't think you need to say that one's better than the other, but they kind of both show that you can do quite different things with the same materials, which I think is really fascinating. So I noticed there was a slight tweak towards the end in how the composition was structured, that Jeremy reincorporated some of the earlier stuff. And yeah, I guess it's funny that when you're working within it, we were both trying to work with this material, and as you probably get into the piece and your piece starts, your version starts taking on its own life, you start to feel the need for it to go in slightly different places maybe than it was originally. So when I was orchestrating Jeremy's, there was similarly one section halfway through where it just wasn't quite working in the orchestra, and I had to move slightly further away from the material that he had and just add some new details of my own to make it work within that structure. And I kind of see that he's done something a little bit similar here, so that's really interesting as well. Even at the very end, you can see, I think Jeremy's got a tendency to enjoy fading or ending a bit more mysteriously rather than just a sort of big bang, which my original orchestral piece ends with a big bang, but Jeremy's tweaked that a bit to his own style at the end. I'm really excited and pleased with how real it sounds and how much how much great musicianship Jeremy's put into this piece. It's really cool. I think we've proved that you can take two ideas and adapt them into different genres and it can work great. So I think we should do it again.